If you had been there on the day that my dream came true, and you were standing at the bottom of that ski race course in Albertville, France, there's 3 things you would have noticed. The first was the weather. A storm had blown in, and it was a crazy storm, dumping snow. Every snowflake that hit any exposed skin felt like a BB. The second thing you would have noticed was the Olympic flame that stood as if it were a beacon, maybe because it was. The flame refused to go out in spite of the weather that threatened it. And then the third thing that you would have noticed is you watched the racers one by one coming down the race course, that they appeared to be just a little bit different. There was a skier with one leg, there was a skier with one arm, there was a skier with no arms, there were skiers and mono skiers, and there were even blind skiers and their guides. After all, this was the Paralympics. But what you wouldn't have been able to see was the starting gate way up at the top of the hill. I stood in that gate on one leg and one ski on the most important race of my career. The start official said, "Racer ready." And it wasn't a question. Although in that moment, the doubts began to infiltrate my mind. If you could have read my mind in that moment, this is what you would have heard. Do I have time to go to the bathroom right now? Maybe I'm not good enough for this. What do I think I'm doing here? What made me think I could do it? What seemed like an eternity, but was really only just a couple of seconds. I heard the beeper, beep, beep, and I knew I had to break that wand that was going to determine the fate of my race on that day. Well, it was a race, so I pushed out, pushing those doubts and fears to the side, at least I thought I had. And I began to maneuver through the course. I could barely see from gate to gate because the severity of the storm had just decreased the visibility. I felt like I was in a bobsled track because that new snow had piled up into the sides, but I was pushing as fast as I could go, turn after turn after turn, racing toward the finish. And then, as I rounded a left-hand turn, just before the last drop off to the final end of the race, somehow my right arm got stuck behind me in that deep snow, and I slammed to the ground, out of the race for that day. Now, I bet you thought I was going to tell you that I skied on to victory that day and won a medal. And now you're sitting there thinking, gee, Roni, sounds to me more like you crashed and burned. How in the world could that have been the day my dream came true? Well, you see, all my life I had wanted to be an Olympic athlete. But since I was born with only one leg, I was pretty sure that that dream was never going to come true. And there I was in Albertville, France for the Paralympics. So even though I fell in that first race, this was my dream come true. And I'm going to tell you, I like to win. And even though I fell, I believe that winning is important. And I think it's so much easier for us, isn't it, to talk about the successes and the wins than it is to talk about the falls and the failures. As I work with business professionals across the country, something I consistently see is a fear of failure. But even more specifically, it's a fear that maybe I don't have what it takes to get from here, where I'm at, to here, where I want to be, the next level. And what I see how this fear manifests itself is this inconsistent ability to set ongoing goals. With the thought of, well, why should I even bother to set a goal if I'm not going to achieve it anyway? And pretty soon, the dream, the vision of what these professionals thought their life should be like begins to just fizzle and fade away. In my podcast called A Leg Up on Life, I interview highly successful individuals with disabilities. And one thing that they all have in common is they have transformed a seemingly insurmountable obstacle into stepping stones that they have used to achieve their greatness. They all have qualities in common that have allowed them to be successful, not in spite of whatever it is that caused their disability, but oftentimes because of it. Today we're going to take a look at the qualities that you too can manifest in your own life so that when that obstacle comes to you, you can transform it into a stepping stone as you begin to achieve your goal and your greatness.